Have you ever pondered the profound weight of silence? In a world increasingly dominated by the ceaseless hum of opinions, declarations, and controversies, the deliberate choice to remain silent carries an extraordinary significance. The Dalai Lama, a figure of universal admiration and respect, exemplifies this choice with remarkable consistency. As a spiritual leader and a tireless advocate for peace, he has become a symbol of harmony and resilience amidst an ever-polarized global landscape. Yet, his decision to refrain from commenting directly on sensitive political and religious conflicts, especially in relation to his homeland, Tibet, and his host country, India, is as intriguing as it is profound. This silence, far from being a passive stance, reveals itself as a dynamic and intentional practice, rich with wisdom and meaning. It is a silence that does not evade responsibility but instead transforms it into a philosophical exercise. It invites us to reconsider the power of words and their limitations, prompting us to explore the intricate interplay between communication, action, and inner tranquility. What insights can this approach offer in an era rife with divisions and discord? How does the Dalai Lama's restraint challenge our conventional understanding of leadership, activism, and the role of a spiritual guide? This analysis embarks on a journey to uncover the deeper currents underlying the Dalai Lama's silence. It explores the philosophical underpinnings of his choices, the cultural and political contexts that shape them, and the broader implications for individuals and societies navigating the complexities of the modern age. Through an examination of his teachings, his diplomatic strategies, and the timeless wisdom embedded in his quiet demeanor, we aim to uncover lessons that resonate far beyond the confines of any single ideology or nation. The Dalai Lama's silence can be seen not merely as an absence of words but as an active, deliberate response to the challenges of his time. It reflects his commitment to the principles of compassion and non-violence, principles that have defined his leadership and his personal philosophy. His choice to prioritize dialogue and understanding over confrontation and division provides a model for navigating conflicts in a way that emphasizes unity over polarization. This approach is particularly relevant in a world where discourse often devolves into contentious debates, leaving little room for mutual respect or genuine connection. Furthermore, the Dalai Lama's silence serves as a reminder of the importance of inner peace as a foundation for outward action. By cultivating a profound sense of mindfulness and equanimity, he demonstrates that silence can be a source of strength rather than weakness. It is a silence that speaks to the power of reflection, the necessity of patience, and the wisdom of responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. As we delve deeper into this subject, we must ask ourselves, what does the Dalai Lama's silence teach us about the art of listening, not just to others, but to ourselves? How does it encourage us to find clarity amidst chaos, and to act with purpose and integrity in a world that often rewards noise over substance? By examining the layers of meaning in his quietude, we can uncover valuable insights that have the potential to transform our own approaches to conflict, communication, and the pursuit of peace. In this exploration, let us not only seek to understand the Dalai Lama's choices but also to reflect on their relevance in our lives. Let us consider how his philosophy of silence might inspire us to embrace moments of stillness, to seek harmony in our interactions, and to approach the challenges of our age with wisdom, compassion, and resolve. Discover the profound lessons of silence. Subscribe to our channel for insights inspired by the Dalai Lama's wisdom. 1. The role of a spiritual leader, a neutral stance beyond borders. Carrying the weight of countless followers who look to you for guidance, solace, and inspiration is no small task. For the Dalai Lama, this role transcends the ordinary boundaries of leadership. As a spiritual figure revered globally, his mission lies not in the transient domains of politics but in the enduring principles of peace, compassion, and interconnectedness. His approach to neutrality reflects not weakness or passivity but a profound and deliberate philosophy. Neutrality in political context. Although the Dalai Lama has been a central figure in Tibet's struggle for autonomy, he has consistently chosen a path of nonviolence and political neutrality. His middle way approach seeks genuine autonomy for Tibet under the framework of the Chinese constitution. This pragmatic strategy eschews calls for complete independence, emphasizing dialogue and reconciliation over confrontation. By avoiding partisan alliances or divisive rhetoric, the Dalai Lama upholds his role as a spiritual leader whose focus is on healing and harmony rather than exacerbating conflict. This neutrality has profound implications. In a world often dominated by polarizing forces, the Dalai Lama's refusal to take sides allows him to remain a unifying figure. His actions challenge the conventional notion that leadership requires vocal advocacy for one's group at the expense of others. Instead, he embodies a philosophy that seeks to transcend divisions and remind us of our shared humanity. Peace and compassion, core values. The Dalai Lama's teachings consistently emphasize that peace is not merely the absence of conflict but the presence of compassion and understanding. He asserts that world peace cannot be achieved through prayers alone, it requires tangible action rooted in inner transformation. This philosophy underscores his belief that personal growth and global change are deeply interconnected. By fostering inner peace, individuals can contribute to a collective environment of harmony. Compassion, for the Dalai Lama, is both a moral imperative and a practical solution to human suffering. He argues that cultivating empathy and kindness benefits not only those around us but also ourselves, enhancing our mental well-being and emotional resilience. His advocacy for universal compassion transcends religious and cultural boundaries, offering a framework for addressing global challenges such as inequality, environmental degradation, and social unrest. Interconnectedness and global responsibility. A recurring theme in the Dalai Lama's teachings is the interdependence of all beings. He often likens humanity to a single body, where the suffering of one part inevitably affects the whole. This perspective encourages a sense of shared responsibility for the welfare of others and the planet. In his view, addressing issues such as poverty, climate change, and conflict requires collective action that transcends national and ideological boundaries. This interconnected worldview also shapes his approach to leadership. By prioritizing the well-being of humanity as a whole, the Dalai Lama challenges us to look beyond narrow self-interests. His emphasis on collaboration and mutual understanding serves as a counterbalance to the divisive forces that dominate contemporary discourse. Neutrality as an active choice. Contrary to the perception that neutrality implies inaction, the Dalai Lama's stance is a deeply active choice. By refusing to align with specific factions, he preserves his ability to act as a spiritual bridge. His neutrality does not equate to indifference but rather reflects a commitment to higher principles that transcend immediate conflicts. This position invites reflection on the nature of neutrality itself. Is it, in fact, a stance? In a polarized world, neutrality can be seen as an act of courage, requiring restraint and unwavering focus on long-term goals. The Dalai Lama's refusal to be drawn into partisan battles underscores his belief in the impermanence of worldly conflicts. He challenges us to shift our attention inward, recognizing our own roles in perpetuating discord and striving for personal transformation. Challenges and criticisms. While the Dalai Lama's neutrality has garnered widespread respect, it is not without its critics. Some argue that his lack of direct intervention on certain issues could be interpreted as passivity or a failure to use his influence more assertively. In the context of Tibet's struggle, for instance, some activists feel that his middle-way approach compromises too much, risking the erosion of Tibetan identity and autonomy. However, the Dalai Lama's approach reflects a deep understanding of the complexities of leadership. He recognizes that forceful advocacy can often entrench divisions and provoke further conflict. By maintaining a stance of neutrality, he seeks to create space for dialogue and mutual understanding, fostering conditions for sustainable peace. Lessons for a polarized world. The Dalai Lama's example offers valuable lessons for navigating an increasingly divided world. His emphasis on inner transformation reminds us that lasting change begins within. Before demanding action from others, we must reflect on our own behaviors and attitudes. His commitment to neutrality challenges us to consider whether our efforts to resolve conflicts are motivated by genuine concern for others or by the desire to assert our own positions. In conclusion, the Dalai Lama's role as a spiritual leader is defined by his unwavering dedication to principles that transcend borders and ideologies. His neutrality is not a retreat from responsibility but a deliberate strategy to foster unity and compassion. In a world rife with division, his teachings serve as a powerful reminder of the transformative potential of peace, empathy, and interconnectedness. 2. A debt of gratitude, Buddhist-Hindu relations and India's role. India, often regarded as the cradle of Buddhism, has played an indispensable role in the life and mission of the 14th Dalai Lama and the Tibetan refugee community since their exile in 1959. This relationship, rooted in a shared history and cultural reverence, underscores a profound bond of mutual respect and support. India's hospitality to the Dalai Lama and his followers, particularly in granting them refuge in Dharamshala, has ensured the preservation of Tibetan culture, religion, and identity, while simultaneously showcasing India's commitment to pluralism and its role as a sanctuary for oppressed communities. The Dalai Lama's silence on issues involving India is not an act of indifference but a profound expression of gratitude and a strategic acknowledgement of the intricate dynamics that characterize Buddhist-Hindu relations. By choosing discretion, the Dalai Lama demonstrates a deliberate effort to maintain harmony and respect within the fabric of Indian society, which is home to multiple religious and cultural traditions. His silence serves as a gesture of deference to his host nation, reflecting the wisdom of navigating a complex intersection of gratitude, ethics, and diplomacy. India's role in preserving Tibetan heritage. When the Dalai Lama fled Tibet following the Chinese invasion, India's then Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, extended an open hand, providing asylum and enabling the establishment of Tibetan settlements across the country. Dharamshala, often referred to as Little Lhasa, became the epicenter of Tibetan Buddhism in exile. Beyond offering physical sanctuary, India facilitated the creation of Tibetan schools, monasteries, and cultural institutions, ensuring the survival and transmission of Tibetan heritage to future generations. India's support also reflects its acknowledgement of the historical interconnectedness of Buddhism and Hinduism. Buddhism, which originated in India over 2,500 years ago, shares many philosophical concepts with Hinduism, such as karma, dharma, and samsara. The relationship between the two traditions has evolved through centuries of coexistence, influence, and at times, tension. India's embrace of Tibetan Buddhism is a testament to its broader ethos of religious tolerance and cultural inclusivity. The Dalai Lama's strategic silence. The Dalai Lama's choice to remain silent on sensitive issues concerning India's internal matters is rooted in his deep sense of gratitude. This silence, however, is not a sign of passivity. Instead, it is a carefully considered approach to uphold the harmony between Buddhist and Hindu communities in India. By refraining from commentary, the Dalai Lama avoids potential misunderstandings or conflicts that could disrupt the peaceful coexistence of these two traditions. This silence also reflects a broader philosophical perspective. The Dalai Lama consistently prioritizes universal values such as compassion, peace, and non-violence over regional or political disputes. His stance underscores the belief that fostering understanding and dialogue is more effective than direct intervention in resolving conflicts. By listening and honoring the wisdom of local communities, he exemplifies humility and respect for India's sovereignty and societal dynamics. Buddhist-Hindu relations, a historical perspective. The relationship between Buddhism and Hinduism is a tapestry woven with threads of shared philosophy, cultural exchange, and mutual influence. While both traditions originated in ancient India, they followed distinct spiritual paths. Buddhism, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, challenged many of the orthodox practices of Vedic Hinduism, emphasizing a path of personal enlightenment over ritualistic worship. Despite their differences, the two traditions have historically coexisted and influenced each other. Buddhist monasteries often thrived alongside Hindu temples, and many rulers, such as Emperor Ashoka, promoted Buddhist principles while respecting Hindu traditions. Over time, elements of Buddhist philosophy were absorbed into Hindu thought, and vice versa, creating a unique interfaith dialogue that continues to shape Indian culture. Balancing gratitude and justice. The Dalai Lama's approach raises an important ethical question. How does one balance gratitude with the responsibility to address injustices within the systems that offer sanctuary? In the Dalai Lama's case, his silence on contentious issues can be seen as an effort to protect the sanctity of his relationship with India while trusting in the wisdom and agency of Indian society to address its own challenges. This approach is not without criticism. Some argue that silence in the face of injustice can perpetuate harm or imply complicity. However, the Dalai Lama's philosophy suggests a different perspective, that actions rooted in compassion and understanding can have a more lasting impact than confrontational rhetoric. By focusing on promoting universal values, he seeks to inspire change from within, rather than imposing it from the outside. India's role as a global spiritual leader. India's role in providing refuge to the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan community highlights its position as a global spiritual leader. By preserving and nurturing Tibetan Buddhism, India not only supports a vulnerable community but also strengthens its own cultural and religious diversity. This act of solidarity enhances India's image as a nation committed to the principles of tolerance, compassion, and mutual respect. Furthermore, India's relationship with the Dalai Lama serves as a reminder of the enduring relevance of ancient philosophies in addressing modern challenges. The principles of non-violence, interfaith dialogue, and environmental stewardship espoused by the Dalai Lama resonate with India's historical legacy and contemporary aspirations. The bond between the Dalai Lama and India exemplifies a profound interplay of gratitude, respect, and shared values. It is a relationship that transcends politics, rooted in a mutual commitment to preserving cultural and spiritual heritage. The Dalai Lama's silence, far from being a mere act of passivity, reflects a deliberate choice to honor the sanctuary provided by his host nation and to promote harmony in a diverse society. In a world often marked by division and conflict, the Dalai Lama's approach offers a powerful lesson, that true strength lies in humility, and meaningful contributions often emerge from a place of listening and understanding. Through his actions, the Dalai Lama reminds us that gratitude is not just a personal virtue but a cornerstone of harmonious coexistence. 3. Diplomatic calculus, navigating between China and the world. The Dalai Lama is not only a spiritual leader but also a symbol of resistance and hope for the Tibetan people. His role as the face of Tibetan Buddhism places him at the center of a complex web of geopolitics, where his actions and words carry significant diplomatic weight. The intricate dynamics involving China, India, and the international community make his position uniquely challenging. Understanding his strategic approach to these challenges provides valuable insights into the art of diplomacy and the enduring relevance of restraint and wisdom in global affairs. China's perspective, a persistent threat to sovereignty. From Beijing's perspective, the Dalai Lama represents a direct challenge to its authority and territorial integrity. Since the People's Republic of China incorporated Tibet in 1950, it has sought to establish full control over the region, presenting the annexation as the liberation of a feudal society. However, the Dalai Lama's escape to India in 1959 after the failed Tibetan uprising created a focal point for Tibetan resistance against Chinese rule. As a result, Beijing has consistently labeled him a separatist, accusing him of promoting Tibetan independence under the guise of advocating for greater autonomy. China's sensitivity to the Dalai Lama's activities is evident in its fierce opposition to his international engagements. Visits by the Dalai Lama to countries or regions that Beijing considers sensitive, such as Arunachal Pradesh, a northeastern Indian state that China claims as part of southern Tibet, trigger sharp responses from Chinese officials. In 2017, the Dalai Lama's visit to Arunachal Pradesh led to a stern warning from Beijing, which accused India of undermining bilateral relations and destabilizing border negotiations. Such incidents underscore China's determination to control the narrative surrounding Tibet and to suppress any activities that might lend legitimacy to the Dalai Lama's leadership. India's balancing act, supporting without provoking. India's relationship with the Dalai Lama is multifaceted, shaped by historical, cultural, and strategic considerations. When the Dalai Lama and thousands of Tibetan refugees fled to India in 1959, they were granted asylum by then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. The Tibetan government in exile was subsequently established in Dharamshala, a move that underscored India's commitment to supporting the Tibetan cause. However, this act of goodwill came at a cost, as it introduced a long-term source of friction in India's relations with China. India officially recognizes Tibet as part of China, reflecting a pragmatic approach aimed at maintaining a functional relationship with its northern neighbor. At the same time, India has allowed the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan diaspora to preserve their cultural and religious identity, providing them with a platform to advocate for their rights. This dual approach highlights India's efforts to balance its humanitarian commitments with its strategic interests, particularly in the context of its own border disputes with China. India's management of its relationship with the Dalai Lama is further complicated by regional dynamics. For instance, allowing the Dalai Lama to visit Arunachal Pradesh not only asserts India's sovereignty over the region but also serves as a subtle countermeasure to China's claims. However, such actions must be carefully calibrated to avoid escalating tensions with Beijing, which has shown a willingness to retaliate economically and diplomatically. The Dalai Lama's strategic silence. Amid these complexities, the Dalai Lama's silence on contentious issues, particularly those involving India-China disputes, is a testament to his strategic acumen. His decision to refrain from commenting on such matters reflects a deep understanding of the potential consequences of his words. Any statement perceived as taking sides could jeopardize his sanctuary in India or provoke a harsh response from China, further complicating the already precarious situation faced by the Tibetan community. This restraint is not merely a product of diplomatic necessity but also an expression of the Dalai Lama's philosophical beliefs. As a proponent of interconnectedness, he recognizes that actions have far-reaching consequences. By choosing silence over confrontation, he underscores the importance of wisdom and patience in addressing complex issues. This approach not only safeguards the Tibetan government in exile but also reinforces his message of peace and nonviolence, which resonates globally. Succession and the future of Tibetan leadership. As the Dalai Lama ages, the question of his succession looms large on the geopolitical horizon. This issue has significant implications for Tibet, China, and the international community. Beijing has made it clear that it intends to control the selection process for the next Dalai Lama, aiming to install a figure who aligns with its political agenda. This move is part of China's broader strategy to consolidate its authority over Tibet and neutralize the influence of the Tibetan diaspora. Conversely, the Dalai Lama has suggested that his reincarnation could occur outside Tibet, potentially in India or another country. This proposal directly challenges Beijing's claim to legitimacy over the process and raises the possibility of rival claimants to the title of Dalai Lama. Such a scenario would likely deepen the geopolitical tensions between China and India, with broader implications for the Tibetan movement and global diplomacy. The succession issue also highlights the broader struggle for cultural and religious identity in Tibet. By asserting control over the selection process, China seeks to reshape Tibetan Buddhism in a way that aligns with its vision of national unity. However, this effort faces significant resistance from the Tibetan diaspora and the international community, which continue to support the Dalai Lama's vision of a Tibet that retains its unique cultural and religious identity. The role of the international community. The Dalai Lama's global stature adds another layer of complexity to the diplomatic calculus surrounding his leadership. As a Nobel Peace Prize laureate and a prominent advocate for human rights, he enjoys widespread support from international leaders and organizations. This support, however, often provokes sharp reactions from China, which accuses foreign governments of interfering in its internal affairs. For example, visits by U.S. lawmakers and other dignitaries to the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala have drawn harsh criticism from Beijing, which views such engagements as endorsements of Tibetan separatism. These interactions highlight the challenges faced by countries seeking to balance their support for human rights with their economic and strategic ties to China. For India, the Dalai Lama's international engagements pose a unique challenge, as they intersect with its own diplomatic priorities and regional interests. The international community's role in supporting the Dalai Lama extends beyond symbolic gestures. Organizations and governments can play a crucial role in preserving Tibetan culture and advocating for the rights of the Tibetan people. However, such efforts must be carefully coordinated to avoid undermining the broader goals of the Tibetan movement, which seeks meaningful autonomy within the framework of Chinese sovereignty. Cultural and religious significance. The Dalai Lama's leadership transcends politics, encompassing profound cultural and religious dimensions. As the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, he represents the continuity of a tradition that has shaped the identity of the Tibetan people for centuries. His teachings emphasize compassion, non-violence, and the interconnectedness of all beings, values that resonate far beyond the borders of Tibet. Preserving these cultural and religious traditions is a central aspect of the Tibetan movement. The Dalai Lama's efforts to promote Tibetan language, art, and religious practices underscore the importance of cultural preservation in the face of external pressures. These efforts also serve as a reminder of the resilience of the Tibetan people, who continue to uphold their heritage despite decades of political and social upheaval. Lessons in diplomacy and restraint. The Dalai Lama's approach to navigating the challenges of his position offers valuable lessons in diplomacy and restraint. His ability to balance advocacy for Tibetan rights with a commitment to non-violence and dialogue reflects a profound understanding of the complexities of geopolitics. By choosing silence and restraint in the face of provocation, he demonstrates the power of wisdom and patience in addressing long-term challenges. For policymakers and individuals alike, the Dalai Lama's example serves as a reminder of the importance of strategic thinking and the interconnectedness of actions and consequences. In a world increasingly defined by polarization and immediate reactions, his approach offers a timeless lesson in the value of thoughtful and measured responses. The Dalai Lama's role as a spiritual leader and geopolitical figure underscores the intricacies of navigating between China and the world. His strategic silence, measured actions, and unwavering commitment to peace exemplify the delicate balance required in addressing global challenges. As the world continues to grapple with issues of sovereignty, cultural preservation, and human rights, the Dalai Lama's example serves as a beacon of hope and wisdom, reminding us of the enduring power of compassion and restraint in an interconnected world. 4. Universal values, shifting the lens to global issues. In an increasingly interconnected world, the lessons of the Dalai Lama, a figure renowned for his wisdom and advocacy for peace, offer a profound framework for addressing global challenges. At the heart of his teachings lie universal values, compassion, ethical living, and environmental stewardship. These principles transcend borders, politics, and individual interests, emphasizing a collective responsibility for the well-being of humanity and the planet. This essay explores the Dalai Lama's approach to universal values, analyzing how they provide solutions to global issues while encouraging us to think beyond transient conflicts and focus on lasting harmony. Compassion, the cornerstone of universal values. The Dalai Lama places compassion at the core of his philosophy. According to him, compassion is not merely an emotional response but a deliberate choice to recognize and alleviate the suffering of others. This principle forms the bedrock of many world religions and philosophies, but the Dalai Lama's emphasis on its practical applications resonates universally. Compassion, as the Dalai Lama defines it, transcends cultural and religious boundaries. He asserts that cultivating compassion leads to a sense of interconnectedness, where one acknowledges the shared humanity that binds all people. This perspective is particularly relevant in addressing global crises such as poverty, refugee displacement, and health inequities. When leaders and citizens approach these issues with a compassionate mindset, policies and actions are more likely to focus on equitable solutions rather than perpetuating divisions. Moreover, compassion has a profound impact on interpersonal relationships. By encouraging individuals to prioritize the well-being of others, the Dalai Lama advocates for a society built on mutual care and understanding. In practice, this means adopting inclusive attitudes in community building, fostering environments where diversity is celebrated rather than feared. Such principles align with movements advocating for racial equity, gender equality, and LGBTQ+ rights, all of which are essential for global harmony. Ethical living, a guiding principle for humanity. Another pillar of the Dalai Lama's teachings is ethical living. He stresses that ethical behavior is not confined to religious observance but is a universal necessity for human coexistence. Ethical living encompasses values such as honesty, integrity, respect, and responsibility. These are the virtues that allow societies to function peacefully and prosperously. The relevance of ethical living extends to governance, business, and personal interactions. For instance, corruption in government erodes trust and creates societal instability. Ethical leadership, informed by transparency and accountability, can restore confidence in institutions and promote sustainable development. Similarly, corporations that prioritize corporate social responsibility, considering the social and environmental impact of their actions, exemplify ethical living on an organizational scale. Ethical living also requires self-discipline. The Dalai Lama often speaks of the importance of inner values over material wealth. In a consumer-driven world, this philosophy challenges individuals to reflect on the consequences of their choices. For example, mindful consumption, whether it involves reducing waste, choosing sustainable products, or supporting fair trade, aligns with the ethical imperative to care for others and the planet. Environmental stewardship, a shared responsibility. The Dalai Lama's advocacy for environmental stewardship highlights the universal responsibility to protect the planet. Climate change, deforestation, biodiversity loss, and pollution are issues that affect every nation, demanding collective action rooted in shared values. The Dalai Lama's teachings emphasize the interconnectedness of all life forms and the finite nature of Earth's resources. He calls for a shift in perspective, from exploiting natural resources to preserving them for future generations. This shift requires not only government policies but also individual action. Recycling, reducing carbon footprints, and supporting renewable energy initiatives are tangible ways in which people can contribute to environmental stewardship. Furthermore, the Dalai Lama encourages dialogue between science and spirituality. By integrating scientific findings about climate change with ethical and spiritual considerations, societies can develop holistic approaches to environmental protection. For instance, policies driven by both data and compassion ensure that the burden of climate adaptation does not disproportionately affect vulnerable populations. Silence on regional conflicts, a strategic choice. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Dalai Lama's public life is his silence on specific regional conflicts. Critics might interpret this as a lack of engagement, but it is, in fact, a deliberate strategy to focus attention on universal values. By refraining from commenting on localized disputes, the Dalai Lama avoids deepening divisions and redirects energy toward principles that can resolve underlying issues. Consider the Middle East, where decades of conflict have created cycles of violence and mistrust. The Dalai Lama's approach suggests that addressing the root causes, such as inequality, fear, and historical grievances, through compassion and dialogue is more effective than taking sides. Similarly, his silence on contentious political matters encourages individuals to reflect on their shared humanity rather than their differences. This neutrality does not equate to indifference. On the contrary, the Dalai Lama's universal message seeks to empower individuals and communities to find common ground. His approach challenges us to move beyond short-term thinking and consider the broader, long-term implications of our actions. Universal values as a solution to global issues. The global challenges of the 21st century, climate change, pandemics, economic inequality, and political instability, require solutions that transcend national interests. Universal values provide a framework for addressing these issues in a holistic and sustainable manner. Addressing economic inequality. Economic inequality is one of the most pressing global challenges. According to the Dalai Lama, fostering economic systems rooted in compassion and ethics can reduce disparities. For example, implementing policies that ensure fair wages, access to education, and healthcare reflect compassionate governance. Similarly, encouraging philanthropy and community support aligns with ethical principles, creating a more equitable society. Promoting peace through dialogue. Violent conflicts often stem from a failure to understand or empathize with the other side. The Dalai Lama's teachings on compassion advocate for dialogue as a means of conflict resolution. This approach has been effective in various peace-building efforts, such as reconciliation initiatives in post-apartheid South Africa and the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. By prioritizing understanding over retribution, societies can break cycles of violence and build lasting peace. Combating climate change. The fight against climate change requires both technological innovation and a shift in values. The Dalai Lama's call for environmental stewardship underscores the importance of ethical responsibility. Governments, businesses, and individuals must collaborate to adopt sustainable practices, from transitioning to renewable energy to protecting natural habitats. Compassion for future generations and other species drives these efforts, ensuring that environmental action is not only practical but also morally grounded. The eternal versus the transient. A central question posed by the Dalai Lama's teachings is whether humanity is too entangled in the transient to grasp the eternal. Transient concerns, such as political rivalries, economic competition, and personal grievances, often dominate human attention. However, these are temporary and often counterproductive distractions from the eternal values that ensure collective well-being. To live a life guided by principles that transcend borders and politics, individuals must cultivate mindfulness and self-awareness. Practices such as meditation, self-reflection, and community service help individuals reconnect with universal values. When these values guide decision-making, they create a ripple effect that transforms families, communities, and ultimately nations. The Dalai Lama's teachings on universal values offer a roadmap for addressing global issues in a sustainable and inclusive manner. By emphasizing compassion, ethical living, and environmental stewardship, he challenges us to rise above immediate concerns and focus on principles that unite rather than divide. His silence on specific conflicts redirects attention to the foundational values needed for lasting peace and prosperity. In a world increasingly defined by polarization and short-term thinking, the Dalai Lama's message is a call to action. It invites each of us to reflect on our responsibilities, not just to our own communities but to humanity as a whole. By embracing universal values, we can create a future where harmony, justice, and sustainability prevail. 5. Disputes over Buddhist heritage sites, lessons in cultural preservation. The silence of the Dalai Lama in the face of disputes over Buddhist heritage sites in India is particularly striking. These disputes underscore the intricate tension between cultural preservation and modern development. Two notable examples, Thatlakonda in Visakhapatnam and the Sanah caves in Gujarat, highlight the challenges of protecting ancient Buddhist sites from various threats, including urban encroachment and cultural appropriation. Thatlakonda, Visakhapatnam. Thatlakonda is an ancient Buddhist monastic complex located approximately 15 kilometers from Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh. Dating back to the 3rd century BCE, the site holds immense historical and spiritual significance. Discovered during an aerial survey by the Indian Navy in the 1970s, Thatlakonda comprises stupas, prayer halls, meditation chambers, and viharas, which collectively illustrate the flourishing of Buddhist culture in the region. Despite its historical importance, Thatlakhanda faces significant threats. Rapid urbanization and infrastructure projects have encroached upon the protected area, leading to environmental degradation and potential loss of archaeological integrity. Activists and conservationists have called for stricter enforcement of heritage laws to safeguard the site. They argue that preserving Thatlakhanda is not merely about protecting an archaeological site but also about honoring a spiritual and cultural legacy that resonates globally. Efforts to protect Thatlakhanda have included public petitions, awareness campaigns, and legal interventions. However, the challenge lies in balancing the region's developmental needs with the imperatives of heritage conservation. The question remains whether India's legal framework and public institutions can adequately protect such a culturally significant site from modern pressures. Sanah Caves, Gujarat. The Sanah Caves, located in Gujarat's Gir Somnath district, are another poignant example of disputes over Buddhist heritage. This network of 62 rock-cut caves, dating back to the 2nd century BCE, once served as a thriving center for Buddhist monastic activities. The caves contain stupas, chaityas, prayer halls, and viharas, monastic cells, showcasing the architectural and spiritual achievements of ancient Buddhist communities. In recent years, however, the Sanah caves have become a flashpoint for cultural and religious tensions. Buddhist activists have protested the conversion of these caves into Hindu temples, arguing that such actions erase the Buddhist heritage intrinsic to the site. They contend that the rebranding of the caves undermines historical accuracy and diminishes the cultural diversity that defines India's heritage. Moreover, the lack of adequate government oversight has exacerbated the problem. Without proper protection, the caves are vulnerable to vandalism, neglect, and unauthorized modifications. Activists emphasize the need for a unified strategy involving local authorities, historians, and community stakeholders to ensure the caves' preservation while respecting their historical significance. The Dalai Lama's silence, a deliberate choice. The Dalai Lama's decision to remain silent on these disputes has raised questions among scholars and activists. While some view his silence as a missed opportunity to advocate for the protection of Buddhist heritage, others interpret it as a strategic move rooted in his philosophy of non-interference and empowerment. The Dalai Lama has consistently emphasized the importance of localized solutions to social and cultural challenges. By entrusting the resolution of these issues to local communities and legal frameworks, he reinforces the principle of collective wisdom. This approach aligns with his broader spiritual teachings, which advocate for compassion, dialogue, and shared responsibility. However, this stance also invites debate. Should spiritual leaders, especially those with global influence, play a more active role in cultural preservation? Or does true leadership lie in empowering others to take initiative? These questions highlight the complexity of balancing spiritual guidance with practical advocacy. Lessons in cultural preservation. The disputes over Thatlakhanda and the Sanah caves offer valuable lessons in cultural preservation. First, they underscore the need for robust legal frameworks to protect heritage sites from modern threats. India's existing laws, such as the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act, provide a foundation, but effective implementation requires greater public awareness and institutional commitment. Second, these cases highlight the importance of community involvement. Successful preservation efforts often rely on local stakeholders who have a direct connection to the heritage in question. Engaging communities through education and participatory decision-making can foster a sense of ownership and responsibility. Finally, the disputes illustrate the broader challenge of reconciling cultural preservation with modern development. As India continues to grow economically, the pressure to prioritize infrastructure and urbanization will only increase. Striking a balance between these competing priorities is essential to safeguarding the country's rich and diverse heritage. The controversies surrounding Thatlakhanda and the Sanah caves are not merely local issues but reflections of a global challenge, preserving cultural heritage in an era of rapid change. While the Dalai Lama's silence may signal his faith in localized solutions, it also raises important questions about the role of spiritual leaders in advocacy. Ultimately, the resolution of these disputes will require a collaborative effort that respects both the past and the future, ensuring that these sacred sites continue to inspire generations to come. 6. Historical context: the evolution of silence. To understand the Dalai Lama's silence, one must delve deeply into the historical trajectory of Tibetan leadership and the philosophical underpinnings of his choices. The Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, has been a central figure not just in Tibetan Buddhism but also in global discussions about peace, compassion, and resilience. His silence is not a mere absence of words but a profound and strategic response rooted in historical, cultural, and philosophical dimensions. Let us explore this evolution and its broader implications. The historical roots of leadership in Tibet. Leadership in Tibet has traditionally been deeply intertwined with spiritual guidance. The Dalai Lama, as the highest spiritual authority, has historically played a dual role, guiding the Tibetan people spiritually while also acting as a political leader. This dual responsibility became especially pronounced after the Chinese occupation of Tibet in the mid-20th century. The 1950 invasion by the People's Liberation Army marked a turning point in Tibetan history, forcing the Dalai Lama into a role of not just a religious leader but also a symbol of Tibetan identity and resistance. In 1959, following a failed uprising against Chinese rule, the Dalai Lama fled to India, establishing a government in exile in Dharamshala. This marked the beginning of his exile and a new chapter in Tibetan leadership. The Dalai Lama's efforts to preserve Tibetan culture, language, and religion under these dire circumstances have been monumental. His leadership evolved to focus on nonviolent resistance, drawing global attention to the Tibetan cause while maintaining a message of peace and dialogue. Silence as a strategy, resilience and adaptability. The Dalai Lama's silence should not be misconstrued as passivity or withdrawal. Instead, it is a calculated and deeply philosophical strategy. For decades, he has faced the challenge of advocating for Tibet's autonomy without provoking further repression or conflict. Silence, in this context, serves multiple purposes. 1. Non-provocation. In the face of an adversary like China, which maintains strict control over narratives and dissent, silence minimizes the risk of escalation. By avoiding inflammatory rhetoric, the Dalai Lama prevents giving the Chinese government grounds for further repression. 2. Reflection of Buddhist teachings. The principle of impermanence, anicca, in Buddhism underscores the transient nature of all things, including suffering and conflict. Silence embodies this principle, serving as a reminder that all struggles, no matter how intense, are temporary and subject to change. 3. Universal messaging. By choosing silence in certain contexts, the Dalai Lama elevates his message to a universal level. His silence speaks louder than words, symbolizing patience, compassion, and the wisdom of restraint. It shifts the focus from the conflict to broader themes of peace and understanding. Philosophical foundations, impermanence and equanimity. The Buddhist principle of impermanence has been a cornerstone of the Dalai Lama's approach. Impermanence teaches that nothing in life is permanent, not suffering, not conflict, not even joy. This perspective encourages a balanced view of life, reducing attachment to transient emotions and circumstances. In practice, this philosophy translates into equanimity. The Dalai Lama's silence reflects a profound understanding of equanimity, the ability to remain calm and composed in the face of adversity. This composure is not born out of indifference but from a deep understanding of the nature of existence. Lessons for modern challenges. The Dalai Lama's approach offers valuable insights for addressing contemporary struggles. 1. Patience in adversity. Recognizing the transient nature of challenges can help us navigate them with greater patience and resilience. By adopting silence or restraint, we can create space for reflection and thoughtful action. 2. Focus on universal values. in a polarized world, silence can sometimes transcend words. It can serve as a unifying force, emphasizing shared human values rather than divisive narratives. 3. Empathy and compassion. Silence, when used wisely, fosters empathy. It allows us to listen more deeply and respond with greater understanding, reducing conflict and fostering dialogue. The Dalai Lama's silence is not an absence but a presence, a deliberate and thoughtful choice informed by decades of experience, philosophical insight, and a deep commitment to peace. His silence serves as a reminder of the power of restraint, the wisdom of impermanence, and the enduring strength of compassion. In a world often overwhelmed by noise and conflict, his approach challenges us to re-evaluate our own responses to adversity. Could embracing silence help us navigate our struggles with greater equanimity and wisdom? The Dalai Lama's journey suggests that it can. 7. Tensions within the Tibetan diaspora, a balancing act. The Tibetan diaspora, scattered across various nations since the Chinese annexation of Tibet in 1950, stands as a testament to resilience and survival amidst political, cultural, and social challenges. This community, however, is not without internal tensions. Central to these divisions is the approach advocated by the Dalai Lama, the spiritual and erstwhile political leader of Tibet, who has championed a philosophy of compromise and dialogue with the Chinese government. His middle way approach seeks peaceful coexistence and cultural preservation rather than outright independence, a stance that has drawn both praise and criticism within the diaspora. These tensions encapsulate deeper questions about identity, strategy, and the future of the Tibetan cause. Historical context: the Tibetan struggle. To understand the current dynamics of the Tibetan diaspora, it is crucial to trace the historical roots of the Tibetan struggle. In 1950, the Chinese People's Liberation Army invaded Tibet, claiming it as an integral part of China. This occupation was met with widespread resistance, culminating in the failed 1959 uprising, which forced the 14th Dalai Lama and thousands of Tibetans to flee to India. Over the decades, the exiled Tibetan community has established a robust infrastructure, including schools, monasteries, and the Central Tibetan Administration, CTA, often referred to as the Tibetan government in exile. Despite these efforts, the question of Tibet's political future remains unresolved. The Chinese government maintains a firm stance on Tibet as an inseparable part of China, while Tibetans in exile grapple with varying visions for their homeland, ranging from calls for complete independence to aspirations for genuine autonomy within China. The Dalai Lama's middle way approach is a cornerstone of this debate, advocating for autonomy under Chinese sovereignty rather than full independence. The middle way approach, a philosophy of pragmatism. Articulated formally in 1974, the middle way approach is rooted in the Dalai Lama's commitment to nonviolence, dialogue, and reconciliation. It proposes meaningful autonomy for Tibet within the framework of the People's Republic of China, focusing on the preservation of Tibetan language, religion, culture, and environmental integrity. The Dalai Lama's position reflects a pragmatic understanding of global geopolitics and the realities of Chinese dominance. The middle way approach has garnered significant international support, including endorsements from human rights organizations and governments advocating peaceful conflict resolution. Key principles of this approach include: 1. Nonviolence, a rejection of armed struggle as a means to achieve political goals. 2. Dialogue, emphasis on negotiation and mutual understanding with Chinese authorities. 3. Cultural preservation, ensuring the survival of Tibetan identity, language, and spiritual traditions. 4. Environmental stewardship, recognizing the ecological significance of the Tibetan Plateau as a global resource. Despite its apparent reasonableness, the approach has faced criticism from within the Tibetan community, particularly among younger generations and activists who view it as a compromise that undermines the ultimate goal of independence. Criticism within the Tibetan diaspora. While the Dalai Lama's middle way approach has been lauded for its ethical and strategic dimensions, it has also attracted significant criticism from segments of the Tibetan diaspora. The most vocal detractors include younger Tibetans born in exile and activists affiliated with organizations such as the Tibetan Youth Congress and Students for a Free Tibet. These groups advocate for Rangzen, or complete independence, arguing that the middle way approach concedes too much to Beijing. Critics highlight several concerns. 1. Compromise over sovereignty. The approach's acceptance of Chinese sovereignty is seen as a betrayal of Tibet's historical independence. 2. Ineffectiveness in negotiations. Many argue that China's refusal to engage meaningfully with the Dalai Lama's proposals undermines the viability of the middle way approach. 3. Erosion of cultural identity. There is a fear that prolonged negotiation and lack of assertiveness may lead to the gradual assimilation and loss of Tibetan cultural identity. 4. Generational divide. Younger Tibetans, who have grown up in exile, often view the middle way approach as outdated and out of touch with the aspirations of the new generation. These criticisms underscore the growing frustration within the diaspora, particularly as reports of human rights violations and cultural repression in Tibet continue to emerge. Activists argue that a more assertive stance, including calls for independence and international pressure, is necessary to keep the Tibetan cause alive. Generational perspectives and the role of identity. The division within the Tibetan diaspora is not merely ideological but also generational. Older Tibetans, who lived through the trauma of displacement and the early years of exile, often hold deep reverence for the Dalai Lama and his leadership. For them, the middle way approach represents a realistic and peaceful path forward, grounded in the values of compassion and nonviolence. In contrast, younger Tibetans, particularly those born and raised in exile, exhibit a more radical and assertive outlook. Influenced by global activist movements and equipped with digital platforms, they emphasize the need for visibility, political advocacy, and direct confrontation with Beijing. This generational divide reflects broader shifts in the diaspora's identity. 1. Integration into host nations. Younger Tibetans, growing up in countries like India, the United States, and Canada, often adopt a more globalized perspective, blending their Tibetan identity with their experiences in host societies. 2. Digital activism. Social media platforms have become powerful tools for raising awareness about Tibet, amplifying calls for justice, and connecting activists worldwide. 3. Re-evaluating leadership. While the Dalai Lama remains a revered figure, younger Tibetans are increasingly critical of the centralized authority of the CTA and are exploring decentralized and grassroots approaches to activism. The Dalai Lama's perspective, prioritizing long-term survival. For the Dalai Lama, the preservation of Tibetan culture and identity takes precedence over immediate political gains. He has often emphasized that Tibet's struggle is not merely political but deeply spiritual, requiring patience, resilience, and a long-term vision. This perspective reflects a broader understanding of Tibetan history and the challenges posed by China's global influence. The Dalai Lama's approach is informed by several key considerations. 1. Avoiding escalation. Confrontation with China, a global superpower, risks exacerbating repression and diminishing prospects for dialogue. 2. Cultural resilience. Ensuring the survival of Tibetan Buddhism, language, and traditions is seen as a victory in itself, even if political independence remains elusive. 3. Global support. Building international awareness and sympathy for the Tibetan cause is more feasible through peaceful advocacy than through militarized resistance. This strategy, however, places significant faith in the ability of future generations to sustain Tibetan identity and continue the struggle for their rights. It also relies on the hope that geopolitical dynamics may eventually shift in favor of Tibet. The role of the international community. The Tibetan diaspora's struggle has attracted considerable international attention, particularly in the context of human rights and religious freedom. Governments, NGOs, and advocacy groups have voiced support for Tibet, but concrete actions remain limited due to the complexities of global politics and economic ties with China. Key aspects of international involvement include 1. Human rights advocacy, highlighting violations in Tibet, including religious restrictions, arbitrary detentions, and environmental exploitation. 2. Cultural preservation, supporting Tibetan communities in exile through funding for schools, monasteries, and cultural institutions. 3. Diplomatic pressure, calling on China to engage in dialogue with the Dalai Lama or his representatives. However, the efficacy of international support is often undermined by China's economic and political clout, which discourages many nations from taking a strong stance on Tibet. Lessons in leadership and strategy. The tensions within the Tibetan diaspora offer profound lessons on leadership, strategy, and the nature of resistance. The Dalai Lama's middle way approach exemplifies a philosophy of patience, non-violence, and long-term vision. It challenges the notion that immediate victories are the only measure of success and invites reflection on the value of cultural preservation and enduring legacies. For activists and leaders in other marginalized communities, the Tibetan struggle serves as a case study in balancing pragmatism with principles. It raises important questions. 1. What constitutes success in a protracted struggle for rights and identity? 2. How can communities maintain unity amidst differing strategies and perspectives? 3. What role should cultural preservation play in political movements? The Tibetan diaspora's journey is one of resilience, adaptation, and hope. While divisions over strategy and priorities persist, the shared commitment to the Tibetan cause unites this diverse community. The Dalai Lama's middle way approach remains a cornerstone of the debate, embodying a vision of coexistence and cultural survival. At the same time, the growing assertiveness of younger generations signals a shift in the diaspora's approach to activism. Ultimately, the Tibetan diaspora's struggle reflects the complexities of navigating identity, resistance, and geopolitics in an interconnected world. As the community continues its balancing act between pragmatism and assertiveness, it serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring human spirit and the quest for justice and dignity. 8. The power of educational and cultural preservation. The act of preserving education and culture serves as a vital thread in the fabric of human civilization. Across the world, leaders and communities alike strive to safeguard their heritage, understanding that knowledge and cultural identity are key to both individual and collective well-being. Among the most prominent advocates for these causes is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whose lifelong commitment to education and cultural preservation has left an indelible mark on humanity. Through his leadership, the Tibetan people, despite the challenges of exile, have maintained their traditions, beliefs, and language, ensuring that their cultural heritage continues to inspire future generations. This essay will delve into the Dalai Lama's initiatives, analyze their impact on Tibetan and global communities, and explore the universal question of how individuals can contribute to preserving and celebrating their own cultural identities. By examining the transformative power of education and culture, we gain a greater appreciation for the efforts required to protect the intangible treasures that define humanity. The Dalai Lama and his commitment to education. Early advocacy for education. The Dalai Lama has long recognized the transformative potential of education. Born as Lamo Thondup in a remote village in northeastern Tibet, he was thrust into the role of spiritual and political leader at a young age. His education encompassed both traditional Tibetan Buddhist teachings and exposure to modern ideas, shaping his vision for a society grounded in both spiritual and secular knowledge. After the Chinese occupation of Tibet in the 1950s, the Dalai Lama's focus on education became even more critical. Forced into exile in 1959, he settled in Dharamsala, India, where he began rebuilding the Tibetan community. Education emerged as a cornerstone of this effort. Recognizing the importance of equipping the younger generation with the tools to thrive in a changing world, the Dalai Lama prioritized the establishment of schools and educational programs for Tibetan refugees. Establishment of Tibetan schools in exile. Under the Dalai Lama's leadership, numerous Tibetan schools were established in India and other host countries. These schools offer a unique blend of modern education and traditional Tibetan teachings, ensuring that students not only excel academically but also maintain a deep connection to their cultural roots. Institutions like the Tibetan Children's Village, TCV, have become models of educational excellence, nurturing generations of Tibetan youth and instilling in them a sense of pride in their heritage. The Dalai Lama's approach to education reflects his belief that knowledge is a bridge to understanding. By fostering intellectual curiosity and moral responsibility, these schools prepare students to engage with the global community while remaining rooted in their identity. The emphasis on values such as compassion, non-violence, and respect for all forms of life further underscores the transformative power of education. Cultural preservation, safeguarding Tibetan identity. The role of monasteries and cultural centers. Parallel to his efforts in education, the Dalai Lama has championed the preservation of Tibetan culture. Central to this mission is the restoration and maintenance of Tibetan monasteries in exile. These institutions serve as custodians of spiritual and cultural knowledge, housing ancient texts, art, and rituals that define Tibetan Buddhism. Monasteries such as Namgyal Monastery in Dharamsala not only provide spiritual training but also function as centers for cultural exchange and academic study. By preserving Tibetan art, music, dance, and medicine, these institutions ensure that the rich tapestry of Tibetan culture remains intact. Additionally, the establishment of cultural centers worldwide has brought Tibetan traditions to a global audience, fostering mutual respect and understanding across cultures. Preservation of the Tibetan language. Language is a cornerstone of cultural identity, and the Dalai Lama has tirelessly advocated for the preservation of the Tibetan language. Recognizing the threat posed by assimilation and displacement, he has emphasized the importance of teaching Tibetan as a first language in exile schools. Efforts to digitize Tibetan texts and develop language learning resources have further strengthened these preservation initiatives. By safeguarding the Tibetan language, the Dalai Lama has helped maintain the cultural continuity of his people. Language serves as a vessel for collective memory, carrying the wisdom and stories of generations. Its preservation ensures that the unique worldview and values of the Tibetan people endure. Bridging Tibetan traditions and the global community. A universal message of compassion. One of the Dalai Lama's most profound contributions is his ability to transcend cultural boundaries and share Tibetan values with the world. His teachings on compassion, mindfulness, and interdependence resonate universally, offering guidance on how to lead meaningful lives in an increasingly interconnected world. Through public talks, books, and collaborations with scholars and leaders, the Dalai Lama has built bridges between Tibetan traditions and the global community. Initiatives such as the Mind and Life Institute exemplify this approach, fostering dialogue between science and spirituality to address pressing global challenges. Promoting cultural exchange. Cultural preservation does not imply isolation. On the contrary, the Dalai Lama advocates for open exchange and mutual enrichment between cultures. Tibetan art, literature, and philosophy have found new audiences worldwide, inspiring movements for social justice, environmental stewardship, and personal transformation. By engaging with other cultures, the Tibetan diaspora has enriched global understanding of themes such as resilience, compassion, and the pursuit of wisdom. These exchanges highlight the universal relevance of Tibetan culture while celebrating its unique contributions to humanity. The transformative power of education and culture. Strengthening communities. Education and culture serve as powerful tools for community building. They foster a sense of belonging and shared purpose, uniting individuals around common values and goals. The Dalai Lama's initiatives exemplify this principle, creating spaces where Tibetans in exile can reconnect with their roots and support one another. This sense of community extends beyond the Tibetan diaspora. By promoting understanding and empathy, education and culture bridge divides and build solidarity across diverse groups. In a world marked by conflict and fragmentation, these efforts offer a model for peaceful coexistence. Empowering individuals. Education empowers individuals to navigate the complexities of modern life while remaining true to their principles. Similarly, cultural preservation offers a source of inspiration and strength, grounding individuals in their identity and heritage. The Dalai Lama's work demonstrates how these forces can transform lives, enabling people to contribute meaningfully to society. A call to action: preserving and celebrating cultural heritage. The Dalai Lama's legacy invites us to reflect on our own roles in preserving and celebrating culture. While his work is rooted in the Tibetan experience, its lessons are universally applicable. Here are several ways individuals can contribute. 1. Embrace cultural traditions. Participating in cultural practices and events is a simple yet profound way to honor heritage. Whether through festivals, rituals, or artistic expressions, these activities strengthen our connection to our roots and pass traditions on to future generations. 2. Advocate for education. Education is a cornerstone of cultural preservation. Supporting initiatives that provide access to quality education, particularly for marginalized communities, helps ensure that cultural knowledge and values are not lost. 3. Document and share stories. Oral histories, folk tales, and personal narratives are invaluable cultural resources. Documenting and sharing these stories ensures that they remain accessible to future generations and fosters appreciation for diverse perspectives. 4. Support cultural institutions. Museums, libraries, and cultural organizations play a crucial role in preserving heritage. Volunteering, donating, or participating in their programs strengthens their ability to safeguard and promote cultural treasures. 5. Engage in cross-cultural exchange. Learning about and celebrating other cultures enriches our understanding of the world. By engaging in respectful dialogue and collaboration, we can build bridges and find common ground across differences. The power of education and cultural preservation lies in its ability to transform individuals and societies. Through the Dalai Lama's tireless efforts, we see a living example of how knowledge and culture can be harnessed to overcome adversity, foster understanding, and inspire positive change. His legacy challenges us to reflect on our own roles in preserving the cultural tapestries that shape our identities. By embracing our heritage and celebrating the diversity of human experience, we honor the past while building a brighter future. The Dalai Lama's work reminds us that the preservation of culture and education is not merely an act of resistance against loss but a celebration of the richness and resilience of humanity. 9. Media and public perception: the dual edges of silence. In an era dominated by relentless media narratives and instantaneous communication, silence is often interpreted in paradoxical ways. For figures of global influence, such as the Dalai Lama, this dichotomy becomes particularly pronounced. On one hand, silence may be seen as a failure to address pressing issues or as a passive response to injustice. On the other, it can be interpreted as an act of profound wisdom, allowing for reflection and a deeper understanding of complex situations. This dual perception underscores the challenges of leadership in a world where public expectations are shaped by the immediacy of modern media. This essay delves into the nuanced relationship between media, public perception, and the strategic silence of the Dalai Lama. It examines the evolution of his communication strategies in response to the digital age, the philosophical underpinnings of his silence, and the broader lessons that can be learned from his efforts to balance quiet reflection with active outreach. The power and peril of silence in the modern world. In the context of modern leadership, silence is a double-edged sword. For many, especially those in positions of influence, silence can be misunderstood as indifference or inaction. This perception is amplified by the media, which often seeks immediate responses to complex issues. In this landscape, silence is a vulnerable position, open to interpretation by a wide range of stakeholders, including supporters, critics, and the general public. However, in spiritual and philosophical traditions, silence holds a different connotation. In Buddhism, for instance, silence is often seen as a form of deep wisdom, a way to transcend the noise of daily life and achieve clarity. The Dalai Lama's approach to silence is deeply rooted in these principles. Rather than reacting impulsively to external pressures, he often opts for measured responses or chooses not to respond at all, embodying the idea that not all questions demand immediate answers. This philosophical foundation presents a stark contrast to the expectations of modern media, which thrives on immediate soundbites and reactive commentary. This tension highlights the broader challenge of navigating leadership in an age where silence can be both a strength and a liability. The Dalai Lama's communication philosophy. The Dalai Lama's approach to communication reflects a careful balance between traditional Buddhist teachings and the demands of contemporary society. His choice to remain silent on certain issues is not an indication of apathy but a deliberate strategy to promote understanding and avoid unnecessary conflict. This approach is particularly evident in his responses to politically sensitive topics, such as the Tibet-China conflict. Silence as reflection. For the Dalai Lama, silence is a space for reflection and a way to approach problems with a calm and considered mindset. This perspective is rooted in the Buddhist principle of right speech, which emphasizes speaking only when words are truthful, beneficial, and necessary. By choosing silence in situations where his words might exacerbate tensions, the Dalai Lama demonstrates a commitment to these principles. The role of patience in leadership. Another aspect of the Dalai Lama's communication philosophy is the emphasis on patience. In his teachings, he often discusses the importance of cultivating patience as a means of achieving inner peace and understanding. This patience is reflected in his communication style, which prioritizes long-term solutions over immediate gratification. For instance, rather than issuing reactive statements to every development in the Tibet-China situation, he focuses on fostering dialogue and understanding, even in the face of criticism. Adapting to the digital age. Recognizing the power of digital platforms to amplify his message, the Dalai Lama has embraced technology to connect with a global audience. His team has developed a robust online presence, utilizing social media, websites, and apps to share his teachings and clarify his positions on various issues. This adaptation underscores the importance of clear communication in an age where misinformation can spread rapidly. Social media as a tool for outreach. The Dalai Lama's presence on social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook has allowed him to reach millions of followers worldwide. Through these platforms, he shares messages of peace, compassion, and mindfulness, often accompanied by images and videos that resonate with a diverse audience. For example, his tweets often include simple yet profound reflections that encourage followers to embrace kindness and tolerance in their daily lives. Overcoming barriers to communication. One of the most significant challenges the Dalai Lama faces is the censorship imposed by the Chinese government, which restricts his access to audiences within China. To overcome this barrier, his team has employed creative strategies, such as hosting online discussions and utilizing proxy platforms to engage with Chinese-speaking audiences. These efforts highlight the importance of adaptability in ensuring that his message reaches those who need it most. The role of apps and digital resources. In addition to social media, the Dalai Lama's team has developed digital resources such as mobile apps that provide access to his teachings, speeches, and news updates. These tools enable individuals to engage with his philosophy at their own pace, fostering a deeper connection with his message. The use of digital platforms also reflects his understanding of the need to meet people where they are, adapting traditional teachings to the realities of modern life. Challenges of misinterpretation. Despite his efforts to communicate clearly, the Dalai Lama's silence and statements are sometimes misinterpreted. This is particularly true in politically charged contexts, where his words or lack thereof are scrutinized by various interest groups. For example, his call for a middle way approach to the Tibet-China issue has been praised by some as a pragmatic solution but criticized by others as a compromise of Tibetan independence. The media's role in shaping perception. The media plays a significant role in shaping public perception of the Dalai Lama's silence. Sensationalist reporting and selective quoting can distort his intentions, leading to misunderstandings among audiences unfamiliar with his philosophy. This dynamic underscores the need for careful messaging and proactive engagement with the media to counteract misrepresentation. Navigating criticism. Criticism is an inevitable part of leadership, particularly for figures as prominent as the Dalai Lama. While some critics argue that his silence on certain issues reflects a lack of courage, others view it as a necessary strategy to maintain his role as a unifying figure. This tension highlights the complex interplay between public expectations and the realities of leadership in a polarized world. Lessons for modern leadership. The Dalai Lama's approach to balancing silence with communication offers valuable lessons for leaders navigating the complexities of the modern world. His example demonstrates the importance of aligning actions with values, prioritizing long-term impact over short-term reactions, and adapting to changing circumstances without compromising core principles. The value of reflection. In a fast-paced world, the ability to pause and reflect before responding is a rare and valuable quality. The Dalai Lama's emphasis on silence as a space for reflection serves as a reminder that thoughtful responses often carry more weight than impulsive reactions. This lesson is particularly relevant for leaders facing high-stakes decisions, where the consequences of their actions can have far-reaching implications. Building trust through authenticity. Authenticity is a cornerstone of effective leadership, and the Dalai Lama's unwavering commitment to his values has earned him the trust of millions. By staying true to his principles, even in the face of criticism, he demonstrates the power of authenticity in building lasting relationships with followers and stakeholders. Harnessing technology for positive impact. The Dalai Lama's use of digital platforms illustrates the potential of technology to amplify positive messages and bridge divides. For leaders seeking to connect with diverse audiences, his example underscores the importance of leveraging technology in a way that aligns with their values and goals. The Dalai Lama's navigation of silence and communication in the age of media offers profound insights into the complexities of modern leadership. His ability to balance quiet reflection with active outreach reflects a deep understanding of the power of words and the importance of timing. By embracing technology and maintaining a steadfast commitment to his values, he has succeeded in sharing his message of peace and compassion with a global audience. In a world where media often amplifies division and misunderstanding, the Dalai Lama's example reminds us of the value of patience, authenticity, and thoughtful communication. His efforts to navigate the dual edges of silence provide a timeless lesson for leaders and individuals alike, encouraging us to approach challenges with wisdom and a commitment to the greater good. 10. The philosophy of silence, a reflection. Silence is often misconstrued as a void, a mere absence of words or sound. Yet, in the realm of spiritual philosophy, particularly within Buddhism, silence holds profound meaning. The Dalai Lama, as a spiritual leader and advocate for global peace, embodies the essence of this philosophy. His silence is not merely a personal practice but a deliberate act imbued with mindfulness, compassion, and an awareness of the interconnectedness of all life. In this essay, we will explore the multifaceted philosophy of silence, as reflected in the teachings of the Dalai Lama and Buddhist traditions. We will examine how silence fosters personal growth, deepens connections with others, and nurtures the spirit in ways that transcend verbal communication. Silence as a path to mindfulness. At the heart of Buddhist teachings lies the practice of mindfulness, an awareness of the present moment, unclouded by distractions of the past or future. Silence serves as a fertile ground for cultivating mindfulness. When we refrain from speaking, we create space to observe our thoughts, emotions, and surroundings more clearly. The Dalai Lama has often emphasized that true understanding arises not from endless chatter but from a quiet mind capable of deep reflection. Mindfulness in silence requires us to listen, not just to the world around us but also to our inner selves. By choosing silence, we interrupt the habitual flow of unnecessary words and judgments, allowing ourselves to engage more fully with the present moment. This aligns with the Buddhist practice of right speech, one of the Eightfold Path's tenets, which encourages thoughtful and compassionate communication. Silence, then, becomes a prelude to mindful speech, ensuring that our words are both purposeful and kind. Silence and compassion. Compassion, another cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy, is deeply intertwined with silence. In a world saturated with noise, silence offers a rare opportunity to connect genuinely with others. By listening attentively, without the urge to respond or interject, we demonstrate empathy and respect. This act of deep listening is a form of compassion in itself, as it prioritizes the needs and feelings of others over our desire to speak. The Dalai Lama has repeatedly highlighted the importance of cultivating an open heart, and silence is instrumental in this process. When we silence our inner critic and the incessant chatter of our minds, we become more receptive to the suffering and joys of others. This receptivity fosters a sense of unity and shared humanity, reinforcing the Buddhist principle of interconnectedness. The power of interconnectedness. Interconnectedness, or Thich Nhat Hanh, as it is known in Vietnamese Buddhism, is a central concept in Buddhist thought. It refers to the understanding that all beings and phenomena are fundamentally connected. Silence allows us to perceive this interconnectedness more deeply. In the absence of words, we can attune ourselves to subtle cues, a gesture, a facial expression, or even the energy of a shared moment. These nonverbal forms of communication often convey more profound truths than words ever could. The Dalai Lama's silent presence during meditative gatherings exemplifies this principle. His stillness radiates a sense of calm and unity, reminding us that connection transcends language. Through silence, we come to realize that we are not isolated entities but integral parts of a greater whole. This realization has profound implications for how we treat one another and the planet. Silence as an act of resistance. In a society that values constant activity and noise, silence can be a radical act. Choosing silence in a world driven by ceaseless communication challenges societal norms and invites us to reconsider our priorities. The Dalai Lama's silence, particularly in moments of political or social tension, is a deliberate choice to prioritize peace and reflection over reactive rhetoric. This form of resistance aligns with the Buddhist practice of non-attachment. By refraining from speech, we detach from the ego's need to assert itself through words. Instead, we focus on actions that align with our values and contribute to the greater good. Silence, in this context, becomes a powerful tool for fostering change without perpetuating conflict. The role of silence in personal growth. On an individual level, silence is a catalyst for self-discovery and personal transformation. When we embrace silence, we confront the thoughts and emotions that often remain hidden amidst the noise of daily life. This confrontation can be uncomfortable, but it is essential for growth. The Dalai Lama's teachings emphasize the importance of introspection in understanding our true nature. Silence provides the ideal environment for such introspection. It allows us to identify and let go of negative patterns, develop greater self-awareness, and cultivate inner peace. This process mirrors the practice of meditation, where silence serves as a gateway to deeper states of consciousness. The art of listening. Listening is an often overlooked aspect of silence. True listening requires more than hearing words. It demands an open mind and a willingness to understand without judgment. The Dalai Lama's ability to listen deeply, to individuals, communities, and even the unspoken needs of the world, is a testament to the transformative power of silence. Through listening, we not only honor the experiences of others but also gain insights that can inform our actions and decisions. This practice is particularly relevant in today's polarized world, where genuine dialogue is increasingly rare. By choosing to listen rather than speak, we create space for understanding and reconciliation. Silence in practice, a global perspective. While the Dalai Lama's silence is deeply rooted in Buddhist philosophy, its significance extends beyond religious or cultural boundaries. Silence is a universal language that resonates with people from all walks of life. In diverse spiritual traditions, from Christian contemplative prayer to indigenous practices of quiet communion with nature, silence plays a central role in fostering connection and insight. For instance, the Quaker tradition includes periods of silent worship, where individuals gather to reflect and seek guidance. Similarly, many indigenous cultures view silence as a way to honor the natural world and its rhythms. These practices underscore the universality of silence as a bridge between the individual and the greater whole. Challenges and misconceptions. Despite its profound benefits, silence is often misunderstood or undervalued. In many cultures, silence is associated with weakness, passivity, or ignorance. These misconceptions stem from a societal emphasis on verbal expression as the primary means of communication and power. The Dalai Lama's approach challenges these stereotypes. His silence is not a retreat but an intentional act of presence and engagement. It demonstrates that silence can be a source of strength and clarity, enabling us to respond to life's challenges with wisdom and compassion. Practical ways to cultivate silence. For those inspired to explore the philosophy of silence, there are several practical steps to incorporate it into daily life. 1. Meditation. Dedicate time each day to sit in silence and observe your thoughts without judgment. 2. Mindful communication. Practice pausing before speaking to ensure your words are necessary and kind. 3. Deep listening. Focus fully on the speaker without planning your response. 4. Nature retreats. Spend time in natural settings to reconnect with the stillness of the environment. 5. Digital detox. Limit exposure to noise and distractions from technology. The philosophy of silence, as embodied by the Dalai Lama, invites us to reimagine our relationship with words and stillness. It challenges us to embrace silence not as a void but as a vibrant space for mindfulness, compassion, and interconnectedness. In a noisy world, silence offers a sanctuary, a place where we can reflect, grow, and connect more deeply with ourselves and others. By choosing silence, we honor its transformative power and align ourselves with a path of wisdom and peace. Conclusion: the legacy of a quiet leader. The Dalai Lama's approach to silence in the face of political and religious conflicts is not a withdrawal, but an offering, a sanctuary where universal truths have the freedom to thrive amid the relentless noise of the world. His silence is not born of inaction or apathy, rather, it is a deliberate, strategic, and deeply spiritual choice. It reflects his unwavering commitment to principles of compassion, humility, and interconnectedness, shaped by both historical circumstance and his profound respect for the values of his host nation. Through his silence, the Dalai Lama issues an invitation, a call to each of us to pause, to reflect, and to engage in the often overlooked practice of listening. He reminds us that silence is not an absence but a presence, a space where insight and understanding can take root. It challenges us to step away from the ceaseless clamor of our daily lives and consider what truly matters, not just in fleeting moments of peace but as a guiding principle for navigating the complexities of our existence. As we face our own conflicts, both personal and collective, the Dalai Lama's quiet wisdom serves as a beacon. It asks us to look inward, to confront the noise within ourselves, and to create spaces where understanding and reconciliation can emerge. His legacy is a testament to the transformative power of stillness in a world that often equates noise with progress and volume with influence. So today, and every day, we are left with a choice. Will we contribute to the noise, or will we strive to cultivate silence that fosters clarity and connection? The answer lies not in the words we utter, but in the intentions we hold within the sacred quiet of our hearts, a silence that speaks volumes, if we only take the time to listen.